Kumlen and Ablat Gemara. We are up to Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph. This is davening that we say every day, and that is the sikha that you sent us 3 weeks ago to explain why we say this in davening when the halach is not like Abba Shol. You remember we had a Daf Yudal, we had a machlekes there. We break up the lighting of the cleaning of the candles in the morning. We break it up into 2 parts. First 5, then there's an interruption, and then there's 2. So Abba Shol learns that Titus is the last thing because the way the sequence of the pasuk, Titus is the last thing, and how you divide between the 5 and the 2 is the damatomid, the blood of the carbon tummy, the sprinkling of the carbon tummy. But Rabbanan say no, that Titus is what you use to split between the 5 and the 2, and the damatomid takes place before the 5. But Abaye, when he was Musadid, the whole Seder Hayom, he followed Abba Shol. And everybody points out that on Sukkot, that on Yom Kippur, we actually change the davening around to suit the halacha like a chamim. That's why he has a problem with the Kesef Mishnah, who tries to say that this is davening, and we didn't want to change the davening because this is the only thing that we have that talks, canvases all the activities of the day. So they said, but by Yom Kippur, we do change because we actually put in the correct way. So, and then they give the Bira Pichsidis. Why Abaye and Abba Shol? Abaye didn't have a father, and Abba Shol meet borrow the father and be mamshich certain Julian from above. So 30 lines on top. Abaye Mesadir Ma'aroch Mashmei the Gemara. Abaye used to tabulate the activities of the day based on the tradition. The Gemara, the Liba, the Abba Shol, following the view of Abba Shol, who says that the traders comes all the way at the end. So this is how it works. Instead of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, he says each activity takes place before the next activity. That's how you work out what the next activity is. So first of all, on the Mizbeach itself, we had 2 piles. You had 2 piles there of wood. One was the Ma'arocha Gedayla, which he used to burn all the karbanos, and one was the small Ma'arocha, which they took the fire, the coals for the wood to bring to the inner Mizbeach to burn the fetus. So the Ma'arocha Tana was only used exclusively for the fetus. The Ma'arocha Gedayla was used for everything. And in fact, if they ran out of wood in the Ma'arocha Tana, they would then go to the Ma'arocha Gedayla and to the larger fire and take it from there as well. So comes one of the buys in Abba Shol, Ma'arocha Gedayla. The very first activity is the working with the large pile, and that is Kaidemis Ma'arocha Shniya Shaktatus, and that takes precedence before we start filling up the wood on the smaller fire. Taste already asked, if you're already starting the activities of the day, start with Trumas Adeshin. Taste already take 2 answers, but mainly Trumas Adeshin can be done at night. It's always done at night. These activities can be done in the day as well. So we're talking about the day activities. Says the Gemara, all because there was a big delay between the Ma'arocha, between Trumas Adeshin, and all these other activities more or less followed one after another in train. But Trumas Adeshin could have taken hours before, exactly. These are also done by pre-dawn, this Ma'arocha, but didn't have to be, but that's how it usually was done. But the time difference between remember you learned Trumas Adeshin sometimes can be done by Chatzos, depends if it's Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, or something even before Chatzos, like Yom Tov when you have so many kabbanas coming. So Ma'arocha Gedayla is Ma'arocha Shniya Gedayla, and then the next activity is filling up the second Ma'arocha, the small one. That takes precedence over the Siddur Shnei Gzirei Eitzim. The next thing is you put those 2 pieces of wood going across the width of the big, and that goes only, as we'll see, on the Ma'arocha Gedayla. Those pieces of wood are only on the Ma'arocha Gedayla. The Siddur Shnei Gzirei Eitzim Kaidim L'Dishim L'Pnimi. The next activity is they clean out the inner Mizbeach, which takes place for Dishim Mizbeach HaPnimi. Kaidim takes place before the Hatovas Chamesh Neder, before they clean out the 5 candles. Hatovas Chamesh Neder, they're cleaning out the 5 candles. Kaidim takes place before the Dam HaTamid. So how do they break between the 5 candles and the 2? And Hatovas Neder, we already talked about Rashi and what they did exactly about Hatovas Neder, but what they did a Tamatamid to separate the 2, divide. They did Tamatamid. We'll see on your mother. Not everyone holds you. You need a break or something different. Yeah, and a zik as well. Yeah, everything. The Tamatamid. The Damatamid actually says Shchitul Zrika. The Damatamid, but the main activity the Dam is always the kapara. The Damatamid Kaidim that takes place before Hatovash Denadas. The next activity is the balance of the Meneda, cleaning it. Hatovash Denadas Kaidim Lectadas. The next thing after that is the traders. This is all following Abba Shol, which takes place on the inner Mizbeach, and that takes place before Kaidim Levori. That takes place before taking the limbs from to the ramp up to the mizbeach, from the ramp to the mizbeach. They brought him the mincha. This is the mincha that comes with its carbon tamid shel shacha, but you don't do it straight away. First, you do all these other activities, addition of the meneda, addition of mizbeach haprimi, and you bring in a avodim to the top of the mizbeach to haktorah, and then you bring the mincha that comes along with the tamid shel shacha.
So the whole process was a lot of cold because the
broken up into parts. The mincha is treated separately. So the mincha came after the avodim. The Gemara will go through each one why this is the particular order. They do it, tenth of an acre for the mincha. Mincha comes before the chavitin. The chavitin, that is the mincha that the kohen god will bring from his own money, half in the morning and half at night. And we said, why is it called chavitin? Because it's done on machmas and it's covered in a shallow frying pan. The chavitin l'nesachim. The chavitin takes place before the nesachim, which also comes with the carbon tummy. And the Nesachi comes before the Musafin. Musafin, if it's on Shabbos, there's a Musaf. That takes place after you finish the entire Tamid, including the Nesachim, including the Tamid, including the Mincha, then they brought the Musaf. Musafin comes before the Bazichin. On Shabbos, you have, the Lechem Apanim, and you have the Bazichin that you have there, on, with each loaf. Is the incense, the frankincense there, and that goes on the mizbeach that you have to roast. So that takes place right after the musaf. Then you have if it's Shabbos, then you bring the carbon tamid in the afternoon, and that's the final carbon. And how do we know that? And then it says v'hiktir oleha, you should bring on it. This is on the mizbeach. Chelvei hashlamim, the fats of the shlamim. So we dash in oleh hashleim. The word shlamim here doesn't mean carbon. Shlamim means completing. Oleh hashleim kol hakabanos kulam.
That's the final.
That's the final carbon. Remember, we need a special lima that carbon pesach can be brought afterwards, or not for that. We had a special lima that if somebody's a mechusa kippurim, even though it's an iser asay, to go ahead and bring a carbon afterwards. We're going to allow you. No, the only thing you're missing to finish your mitzvah. You already went your head of Shemesh. You didn't make anything else. You just needed. You didn't bring your kapara. That the kohenim bring the kapara after carbon tummy. There'll be over assay, a small assay versus a big assay. We have that definite test there in Sochem.
It's interesting because we said Tomich Shav and Tomich Shav and Abai. Normally, here it says Tomich Shav and Abai. But morning, because it's broken, this is just that.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Now let's go through. This is whole Abaya. Now let's go through step by step. Amar Abaya, we looked before. The very first maroch you build is the maroch gedola. The chayda isn't potatoes more chashuv. Like I had yesterday a whole discussion. What's more chashuv? The avodas pnim, which clothes are more chashuv? The big day zav or the big day love? This is avodas pnim versus. This is which is called kaparis or red kaparis. Same discussion right here. You would have thought that the marach tana is more significant than marach gedola. Marach tana, you took the wood, you brought it inside the inner mizbech in the heichel, and that's where you burned the ketayis. Versus the marach gedola sitting outside. So shouldn't you first go ahead and do the more chashuva one, the marach gitana? Says the Gemara marach gedola, marach ketayis. But no, how do you know? Time you learned here, oila al meit al mizbeach kol alayla. This is the oila that's burning on the mizbech, which is obviously the pyre. This is the eitzim and should burn. So zu marach gedola. This is the marach gedola, and then it says the eish hamizbeach took a bite. In that pasuk it says that the fire of the mizbeach should continue burning there. What's the point? It's something else. Zumarach shniya shekayim. That's the second marach. So the Torah clearly tells you first about the larger one then the small. Right? How do you know when it says in the pasuk that he ha'oila al migdam mizbeach is referring to the marach gedola, and when it says that the eish hamizbeach took a bite is the marach tana, maybe the other way around. So Gemara says. That's right. Maybe that's a Marach Tana.
But there's no oil on the Marach Tana.
No, maybe the other way around. Rashi says L'hakdi Marach Shakteidus Kisidura the Behekta Kol Alayla Koi. So, what exactly does Rashi mean? Actually, before I'm trying to understand what Rashi means there. Well, the point: how do you know which marach is what? Even though it says Allah Hashikol, it says the pasuk here. Yeah, But then it says Kol Alayla the boy goes to a boy. Yeah, so what does it mean? The order of the pasuk is.
So where do you have to ensure it's continuous fire?
Sorry?
Where do you have to ensure that there's continuous fire even at night?
So it says Asia's bad too good boy Kol Alayla.
So which one is that though? Is that the Malchut Dola, Malchut Tana?
Well, right now we're learning that the second part is Malchut.
So the Malchut Tana is what you have to ensure that it's continuous at night.
That's right.
So that's what he wants to say, because it's got that chashivas, then maybe in the morning that's what you should start.
Okay, but Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi says kisidura, as if you read the pasuk literally. The first part of the pasuk is referring to Marach Shtiyah, and that's hard to understand Rashi. That's why they say before you try to explain what Rashi is saying. But the point, your question is like you're saying. That you want to know in Svara. Mistabra Marocha G'dayla Adipa. The Marocha G'dayla is more choshev. She came kaparasa meruba, right? Because it has the kapara is meruba, because you use it all year long and for all the different kabbalas. No, Adraba Marocha Shniya Adipa is better. She came machnisa mena lefnim. In fact, that's also everyday activity. Can't tell me not like by Yom Kippur versus the rest of the year. This is the everyday also. I feel hochi kaparasa meruba Adipa. The fact that the kaparasa meruba, which means all the kabbalas are done outside of Marocha G'dayla, and you only have one fetus at Marocha Tana, so therefore Marocha G'dayla is important. That's number one. And Ibaisem and Nachman, Eloi Mishka Chaytzim Marocha Shniyah. Why did they run out of wood? Just because it's more chashuv.
The Kamas gives us the chashivas. Over about the fact that you're doing the other one inside.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly saying it. Here's same way you had yesterday. Eichel versus Kamas in a way. Or you buy say wouldn't, if you ran out of wood in the small maracha, that burnt out or something, you could go get some wood from the Maracha G'dayla. So Maracha G'dayla also has a shaykhis dictator. So it has alamites. It's like Kamas Eichel. Okay. What I don't understand is that here we're talking about because it's more chashuv you do it first. Sometimes we say that fakir ma'ila b'kodesh. You start whereby lechem panu we had. Start with a silver table, and then you work your way to the golden table. But we put out the lechem panu. So why don't you say fakir? You're right. Marocha Shni is more chashuv Marocha G'dayla. That's why you start with this. That's why you start with the big one because it's less chashuv. You're asking me a question that the Marocha G'dayla is more is less chashuv than Marocha. This goes all fire thing. You're right. It is less chashuv, and that's why you start Marocha G'dayla. When do we apply the rule of Ma'ila B'Kodesh?
That's the question. That maybe
I'm more happier to say that the Marocha G'dayla is less chashuv than Marocha Shnei. That's my question. So therefore, you should change the order of how you like. What's the conclusion? What's the question? The most question is, isn't this less chashuv than Marocha Shnei? So therefore, Marocha Shnei should be lit first. No, okay, you're right. It's less chashuv, and that's why that's first, because we're working our way up. I don't know the shot. Anyhow, so then it says, Marocha Shnei shaktoides kodemes l'sidur shnei gzirei. And then after we did the Marocha Tana, then we go and put those two pieces of wood, and the two pieces of wood are pasted only in the Marocha G'dayla. First of all, that's the next activity. It says in Pasuk, again, it says in that Pasuk we had before, that the faith of... No, but there sometimes it's not for it's a different activity. It's a different activity. Here, it's the same activity, putting the fire on the shayla. Which one should you do first? They're shechting the tummy, for example. Is it totally different activities?
It's continuation.
Fair enough, yeah.
What's like this negation is really not legal code.
No, if it's going up, then each of these will also be a higher level.
Because if you think about it, I already set up a big fire of wood. So
you shouldn't even have no breder. It has to be on top of a fire. You're putting a token two pieces of wood, so you have no breder. Here it doesn't necessarily apply. The shaila is on which marocha do you put it on? So the Gemara says, it says in the pasuk, the fire in his bear should be burning there, never get extinguished. Then it says, a beer aleha hakoyin, on this fire he should place eitzim in the wood, baboika. And then it's talking about the shnei gzirei eitzim. You place wood, and we dash an oleh on this marocha, but lo al chavata, not on the small marocha. On the large marocha, not on the small marocha. Says the Gemara, miklal the isa lechavata. So from here we see that there is a smaller marocha, but what? The eitzim only go on the larger marocha. In other words, when you're being Masada the Shnei Gzirin, the other one, the fact that the Torah has to bavorn you, the Torah has to tell you, but don't place this on a leha and not another one, means you would have thought you could. In other words, that's how we know that the Marach Shni is already set up before you put the Shnei Gzirin Eitzim on. Because you would have thought, if I'm only putting Shnei Gzirin on the Marach Gedola, I put Marach Gedola, set it up, I should put the Gzirin on it straight away, and then I'll work on the Marach Shni, because that's afterwards. Because the Pasuk has to bavorn you, make sure you put Shnei Gzirin on the big one and not on the small one. That means the small one's already existing, but don't do it. So that's how we know that the small one comes before the Shnei Gzirin. What do you mean? You need a letter to tell you where to put the Shnei Gzirin. It's not extra. It's not, you're making a deal. The reason why it's less extra to tell you don't put it on the second Marach. No, maybe the second Marach is not there at all. I want to say a leha to tell you where to place the Shnei Gzirin on top, not on the bottom, and not on top of it. Says the Gemara today. Aleh it says twice in the pasuk Aleh. It says in the pasuk ubir Aleh koin eitzim abayka bayka, and then it says orach Aleh Oila. It says twice Aleh. Why is it twice Aleh? One is to tell you where to place it, and the other tell you Aleh. Okay. Siddur Shnei Gzirin Eitzim. Then we said that they're organizing these two pieces of wood. Kaidim l'dishim mizbeach hapnimi. The next step is you clean the inner mizbeach. How do you know? It says over here when it talks about the Shnei Gzirin Eitzim, it says it says twice morning, which means the earlier part in the morning. And later on, when it talks about the Ketaitis, it says, you should make the Ketaitis which means early in the morning. How do you know which activity you should do for preparing the Mizbeach HaPanimi or putting the Shnei Gzirin Eitzim? Putting the Shnei Gzirin Eitzim, which means preparing the fire, is a preparation for the Ketaitis, and that comes first. What's the Machshir Shnei Gzirin Eitzim? The two Gzirin Eitzim. I don't understand. You just said a minute ago that where do you get the fire for the Ketaitis from the smaller Marach? And you just said a minute ago that the smaller Marach, there is no Shnei Gzirin Eitzim. So what are you telling me that the Shnei Gzirin Eitzim is a Machshir and therefore comes before the Dishim Zeh HaPanimi?
What is the Machshir?
Yeah, what's it doing with what's Shaykh the Ketaitis? And for the Gemara, I'm Shnei Gzirin Eitzim lastly only the large Marach, not small one. Shum Eitzim, the name of Eitzim, the title of Eitzim, the concept of wood comes first, even though the wood that you can use in Marach Shnei and the Shnei Gzirin Eitzim is Marach Shnei L'Gdola, but from deswegen the fact that it's wood and wood is a machshir, therefore
it's like we're just
exactly
calling it.
Yeah, exactly. So the Gemara.
What's the idea of having?
It's called shame Eitzim, yeah.
What's the idea generally of this? Just Xeris Akosu for an extra 2 blocks of wood to go on.
Very exactly. So it seems. There's nothing possible article exactly. Now, I think it's not the answer. It's higher width than the No, that's on the bottom.
So
they will be on the bottom. This is a token thing.
So what you're saying is it kind of enhances the middle, the Marocco, because the Marocco has got a certain.
And maybe it makes it look more chashuv.
Because the fact that
there's 2 big blocks of wood.
So enhances. No, the Marocco was in the middle.
Yeah.
But this when the dimensions of this was bigger than Marocco.
The Marach Shniya, the small one, was on the west south, in the southern corner. 4 amas pushed inside from the corner, so it's also almost the middle of the Mizbeach, almost the middle.
So in other words, these 2 blocks of wood with the whole side from one end of the Mizbeach to the other, and that was supported below them
by the fire,
by the fire, the wood.
Exactly. So that's one answer. The shame of Eitzim, it's called Eitzim. Another answer. He finished. Because he started already the Marach, finished the job of the Shnei Gzirin before he jumped to the next in the Mizbeach HaPanimi. We said before, if you don't find wood in the small one, okay, invite them. The next activity is the cleaning of the Mizbeach HaPanimi. Before you start lighting the 5 candles, my time, why use that? Like everything else we do know, but this is a Gemara. As I use this is a tradition. Exactly. Don't ask any questions. But the Rabbah says, no, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why we do Dishim Mizbeach HaPanimi before we get to the Menorah. When you walk into the Heichel, the Shulchan was on the Tzafon, and it went the whole, a certain section. Because remember, we learned the whole Chesh with the Kohanim had to carry 2.5 amas. Then you have the Meneda on the left side, and then the Mizbech was right in the center, was towards the door, closer, not even facing, but was pushed in because we wanted a beeline between the Shulchan that they can see each other, the Shulchan and the Meneda. So it was so two things. First of all, you walked in straight ahead of you, directly in front of you. Plus, it was brought in two things. So the Gemara, so the Shlok is on, but the Shlok is mitzvahs. Bypass mitzvahs. The Chiyayil leheichel. When you enter the heichel, the mizbeach togeberation. That's the first thing that you counter is the mizbeach. The time you learn shulchan batzofen, moshuch min hakoisel shtei amos amachta. They gave 2.5 amos of space so that the kohenim can stand there on the side. Umenoida bedorim. The menoida is on the south side. Meshuchim min hakoisel shtei amos 2.5 amos. Mizbeach memutze v'oimed be'emtza. The mizbeach was in the middle, right in the epicenter of the room. Umoshuch klape chutz kima, and it was drawn a little bit towards the front. A little bit. Wasn't exactly. A little bit, it says, for drawing. Why not in a straight line? Says the Gemara, because it says in the pasuk, the es hameneda noichacha shulchan, the meneda has to be facing the shulchan. It's being in the chazi hadod, they have to see each other. Amar of shmamen of the shlakish. As I think is after we'll be digressing. What do you learn the shlakish about imavin al mitzvahs? Abude deroa atetavsa asa. To bypass your hand by tefillin to go to your head is asa. Rashi learns simply that you have to put on your tefillin shayad before your tefillin sharosh because the imavin al mitzvahs. Tays already asked the reason why you put on the shayad before sharosh is that the shadim lo zayidecha. Then b'hayot tataf is beinenecha. So Teza is talking about when you put it in your zekel, when you put the tefillin in the bag, don't have your tefillin sharosh first, because then you'll have to bypass it to get to the shayad. Put it in, on the side, and then one side, so that you get to the shayad first.
Longer, it's the thing that the fire burns, drop off the side.
Or you mean put it right in the middle, it falls apart.
Maybe they do. They push it in. They do
Yeah, maybe they monitored it.
They body. They push them into the fire. They continue for a while.
Okay, so the Gemara right. Why is the Damatama come there between? But Damatama is my timer. Why break it up and everything else? Says the Gemara. Omar Abaya says, "Ahu baboike baboike the snake zirim." We have in the pasuk it says it's twice baboike, and we said before the pasuk about the snake ziri eitzim. The snake ziri eitzim, we don't need to tell me about boike boike do first thing in the morning, because we learned before that the snake ziri eitzim, which is a machshir, comes before the dish of the beicha primi. So I don't even have to tell me you do about boike boike, because we know the dish of the beicha primi, the next activity, which is cleaning the beicha primi. It says there baboike baboike. So we know that has to be done in the morning, and we know the snake ziri eitzim has to be done before that. So obviously, it has to be done the first thing in the morning. So we have two spare baboikers. What do we do with these two spare baboikers? So we throw in we're going to use it on something else. What are we going to use it for? We don't need it. We'll use it over here. We're going to take one extra baboikin and add it to the hatovas of the 5 natives to say that comes before the tamid. And chad shad, the next one we'll put it to the tamid to tag it to the tamid that comes before the balance, the other 2 natives. And chad shad and the other one shad the other one we tag it to the tamid that should come before the natives. So Gemara explains. Why the hachat losa today? It says now 3 times by boikid by tovas and edus. That's twice in the pasuk, and then once because you just added a boikid, so it makes it 3. And by tamid it says only it's a keves echad tasa by boikid, only 1 boikid, and then you can add 1 more as 2. So 3 comes before 2. So therefore the 5 natives is first, and then the gamma tamid is next. And then the chad shadil damatamid in the kamen, and the other one we use for the tamid. That the tamid takes place before the balance of the 2 natives. So see the minute. Avagav the hocha today the chapet adim. I lechoide by meneda it says also baboiker. So the chayde and damatami you tell me there's one of its own and we threw 1, so they're both equal to 2. Why should the damatami then take precedence? Continue with the 2. Even though both mechaper adid. Nevertheless, a carbon is more chashiv because mechamanate is not mechaper anything. So the tambi takes place before. Why we break up cinnamons? Amala papa labaya, sapapa labaya. No, why you have 2 spare bikers, right? You told me one you're going to use for the 5 natives and one you're going to use for the dama tamid. Why don't we say as follows? That 1 biker we're going to add to the mizbecha primi, make it 3 bikers now from mizbecha primi. and the nekadme ledama tamid. The chad and one shadya ledama tamid, and the other one put a dama tamid. The nigdim latol natus. Who told you to take the spare baboik and add it to the 5 natus, and therefore the 5 natus has now 3, which take precedence over tamid only has 2? Maybe add the baboik to Titus and Mizbech, so that has 3. Add 1 to dama tamid, so that has 2, and then the menorah leave it as it is 2, and then you can tell me that kapara comes first. No, maybe the dama tamid takes place before you taught any of the natus. How do you know you do 5, the dama tamid, then 2? And you can tell me dama tamid is 2, so does the 5 natus. Well, dama daf agav the hochatei mechaper other. Says the Gemara in Kedem. So avsuki b'may avsekula. What are we going to put between the 5 and the 2? Remember, konta b'shol, the tatus is at the end. If you're going to take the dama tamid and bring it all the way before we light the candles, cleaning the candles, we're going to have all 7 together, and we need to break it up. Now I want to ask you a question. Why do you have to break it up? The only reason why we break it up is we want more kainim involved, more, so one kain does a 5, and then you break it up, and then another kain comes does a 2. We want it to be a hive of activity. Yeah, a hive. It's a Rav Am had before. Rav Am had a smell of when there's noise, when it's very it's alive, full of energy. People are there roaming around. So therefore, we want to break it up. People activities. Sorry, we'll get to the second one too. Fine. But now, b'chal the etzem minion. Why b'chal you splitting it? Okay. Yeah. So according to Shlaki, so in other words, why are you asking a question? According to Shlaki, your question might be valid. So shapir. So l'chayda. So according to Shlaki, we're going to break it up anyway, because we're not breaking up because we need an activity. According to Shlakish, we don't need an activity. According to Shlakish, we break it up to have more kainim. So even if your question is a valid question, let's have the dama tamid first, then do the 7 natus, and we'll break it up. I have no activity in between. Who cares? It's not because we want an activity in between. We just want to have more kainim involved. So your question is a valid question. Rabbi Yechanan, the Amor says, "Baboike, udashin baboike by yetiros anedas." Tells you why is it twice baboike by anedas? To tell you to divide the avodah of the menorah into 2 sections. Not stam to have more kainim there, but it's 2 separate avodas. Chilkeyu lishnei pkarim. We want to divide the menorah into 2 parts. So then, then your question on the question, what? No, it's 2 activities. In other words, so then your question, no question. You want to know why don't we take the babayk and add it to the dish with take the other babayk, the carbon tummy, and then you have the 7 candles one after another. You can't, because you have to divide as a babayk. And how do you divide it? Must be an activity in between, but you took away all the activities. You made the dama tummy before that top is chamesh natus. The tatus according to Abishol is at the end of the 7th. So you take the pasuk literally. That tatus is always end. We have no breda. That's why we have to take the babayk and use it for the tavish natus. The tavish chamesh natus, and the other bayk we use for tummy, and 3 babayk is by 5 natus takes precedence over that tummy. But Kodesh Lach, you have a good question. You're telling me the whole board will be in because he has 5 babayk is extra. Don't you need it for itself? That the large maracha should take precedence over the small maracha, because it says in that pasuk babayk on the first maracha, which is the large one. No, this is the one that has to be done first. Babayk. Amalei, he said, no, no, we already know from the first part of the pasuk. It says in the pasuk, not from the bayk. It says, put the snakes on the large one, which automatically tells you that what? That there's a small one there as well. So we know already that there's a small one there. We know already that there's a small one there as well. How do you know to do the 5 and then the 2? Maybe first do 2 and then do 5. Since this is the first activity you have, the first opportunity you have to clean your menorah, do as many as you can. So therefore we do 5. So the obvious question is what time has. The average is to do 6 in the first thing. Why 5? Do 6 and just leave 1 in the token 1 that you leave for later. On Makrok, it says the pasuk bay tiva is hanei reis. The actirena. You have to have nei reis in plural. So you have the minimum of 2. So therefore you leave 2 behind. Then the next part is about topic. Whenever you don't have a number, we always go full.
It's two.
Otherwise, the Torah would be fadish. We take the minimum of plural, which is two. It's as if mefudish two. Atovish they native kademic Torah. He said that the Torah is the last. The Amakra, the hate. This is what Rabbi Shaul says. It says the pasuk literally, "Tiva is a natives, but harder than does the actidena." First is the natives, and then afterwards is the actidena. Okay, they bought him. High no come before they bought him. The time you learn, Yukdam Dover Shenema, but by Traders, it says what? Twice by Boike. It says the Hikul around Traders, I mean, by Boike, but there's an edit. So it says twice by Boike, by Traders, the Dover Shenema, Boike Echad. That takes precedence over something, but it says only by body, it says by Boike. Which is the carbon tummy, all part of carbon tummy, there's only one by Boike. They body in the mincha. How do you know that the bringing their body to the mizbeach takes place before the mincha that comes with the carbon tamid? The time we learn menayin shelo yehei davar koidim letamid shachar. How do you know there should be nothing prior to the tamid shachar? Hamalema to the pasuk, but orach olef ha'oila. The hey idea that this should be the first carbon. Big machlekes are showing him if you did a carbon before, is it still a valid carbon? It's only your over and asay, or is taking any carbon you bring before this oila tamid shachar is disqualified as a carbon. So therefore, so we know that tamid shachar takes precedence is the first thing. Rabba said ha oila he oila rishayim. This is the first thing that you bring up. So therefore, the everything about this carbon takes place first. The mincha takes precedence over the chavitin of the kohen gadol. The mincha of the carbon tamid takes precedence over the chavitin of the kohen gadol. How do you know that? But the Gemara says, it says the pasuk, these are the Abtavim, you should be marketed oila mincha. And then it says zevach u'nesachim. So it says clearly the oila takes place before the mincha. And the chavita l'nesachim, how do you know that the chavita takes place? That you said how do you know mincha chavita? Because the order of the pasuk is oila mincha, and then it says zevach u'nesachim. So we say that the mincha of the carbon comes first. How do you know chavitin comes before the nesachim? We said the chavitin, and then those are breaking up the carbon tummy. First you do the mincha of the carbon tummy, then you do the chavitin of the kohen gadol, which is totally unrelated to carbon tummy, and then you go back to the nesachim. Maybe you should finish the job of the carbon tummy first, nesachim, and then you go back to the chavitin of the kohen gadol. So we say shuv mincha. Saying we said about 8 sim before. The name of mincha, because you raised one mincha, the mincha of the carbon tummy, deal with all the minchas as well, menach as well. Unesachim, how do you know that the nesach comes before the carbon musaf? But it says a pasuk, zevach unesachim. Zevach, which means finish your carbon, and which is like unesachim, and so zevach unesachim, and there should be nothing else between the zevach, which is the carbon tamid shachar you did, with its nesachim. You shouldn't break it up with another carbon. So the carbon musaf therefore delayed till after you complete all the activities to do with the carbon tummy. Says the Gemara, umusafin lebazichin. This that we say that musaf comes before bazichin. That's what you're saying, which is the lechem apani. But Tanya will learn elsewhere bazichin kaid milam musafin. Bazichin comes first. Says the Gemara, you're right. Tanoi is a machlekes a b'shmol a b'kiva. We had a psachim which takes place first, the musafin or the bazichin. Amar Abaya said Abaya. But it makes sense. It makes sense that Musachin take place before the Bazichin. Why? Lami Amri, we said Baboike, Lahaknim. We said before, it's about Baboike. You told me when it says twice the word Baboike, the Torah is trying to emphasize morning, but morning of the morning. That was as early as possible. No, Hochanami here too. But it says over here by Lechem Aponim that B'Yom HaShabbos you should be Achenu. What does the pasuk say? It says B'Yom HaShabbos Yachenu. It's twice. B'Yom. Yom means daytime, right? Full day. And then it says twice means later in the day. Just like Baboike means morning and the morning of the morning. This means the day of the day, later in the day. B'Yom La'achet to delay it. So the position which comes Lechem Aponim should be delayed. My time in the mandama didn't come Musafin. So why does the other one say that that Bazichin takes place before the Musafin? Says the Gemara, Goma we learn al chuka mechavisi. It says the word chuka by chavisa says chuka and by Bazichin it says, and by Bazichin by Lechapam also kodesh kedoshim Hashem chuka and therefore we learn one from another that what just like that the Torahs in the morning takes place before the Musaf. In fact, takes place even before other activities, right? So too the Bazichin, which said the word chukah, takes place before the Kar Musaf. Ready Gemara Mahasam. If you can learn from the Torahs is pretty early in the morning before even the Sachim. Learn everything from there. That want that the Bazichin should take place not only before the Musaf but also before the Nesachim. just like the Titus in the morning. We learn it completely. So Gemara lahochi ahani b'yayim b'yim lachet. B'yayim tells it to delay. The Geshava tells it to bring early. So we bring it earlier than the Musaf, but later than the Nesachim. So it's sort of a compromise between the two. Okay, yeah.